Hey guys, I released a video some months ago talking about chord tones, and I wanted to expand on that idea because it's such a fundamental and important concept to have in your playing as your base to develop ideas. Now, really what I'm talking about is playing just the notes of each chord over a chord progression. And it's a really easy way to get into the chords without having to think about scale tones and chromatic notes. And just using this as your base will help you to develop more sophisticated ideas by using chord tones and non-harmonic notes. Okay, so the chord progression we're going to use is a jazz blues, which is the same as a regular blues. It's 12 bars and it's got the 1-4-5 in it, but it has a few extra chords to it. So that's going to give you some extra chances to use some other chord tones. Okay, the other thing about chord tones, thinking this way is a vertical way of soloing as opposed to a horizontal way. A vertical way of soloing is thinking specifically for each chord, and horizontal playing is thinking one idea over many chords. So everyone's familiar with the idea of playing a blues in A and then using the A minor pentatonic over the whole blues form. That's a horizontal approach to soloing. And what I'm talking about is thinking more vertically, where you address each specific chord. So let me show you the chord progression that we're going to use and the chord tone shapes. Okay, so there's three different shapes that we're going to get under our fingers. A B flat 7, an E flat 7, a G7, C minor 7, and an F7. The E flat 7 shape is the same as the F7 shape and is the same shape as the G7 shape, which is kind of handy to only have one shape for three different chords. Okay, now that you have those three shapes to use as soloing material, let me show you chord shapes that you can use to record and then solo over. And they're good for just rhythm guitar playing in general. Okay, so now here's the chord shapes to use as a rhythm track or just in your general playing. Here's your B flat 7, E flat 7, G7, C minor 7, and F7. Okay, now here's the order of those chords in time. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a lot of things about chord tone soloing to go over, but just a few things to sort of highlight and for you to keep in mind. This idea is really as a vertical approach to soloing over a chord progression as opposed to a horizontal approach, which a horizontal approach is the very common way of approaching, say, soloing over a blues. And a lot of guys, for instance, on a blues in A will use the A minor pentatonic scale over the whole chord progression. And that's totally cool, but this is just a different approach which gets more inside the chords. The other thing about chord tones is that it's a base for you to eventually get more sophisticated. The idea of chord tones is really a great way to help you hear the chord progression that you're soloing on, and it frees up your mind to think more about melody, because when you're having to deal with scale tones, that's 7 different notes that you have to deal with, not only visually, but also with your ear. And chord tones, at least the 4 notes that we're dealing with, is only, well, 4 notes that you have to consider, which is less information, which frees up your mind to, again, just think more about melody and just how it's being expressed musically. Again, this is all about making music, and these shapes and everything that we're going over is just to help you make better music. One thing to consider while practicing chord tone soloing is doing them mechanically Just getting them under your fingers, so that's just second nature, and then going in and making music with it. That's what you want to do immediately once you have the shapes under your fingers, is to try to make melodies and rhythms. And one thing to consider when doing that is leaving space, which is something that isn't always the easiest thing to do. Let me give you an example of practicing the chord tones in a musical fashion while using space. Here's an example of practicing the shapes in a musical fashion, just thinking melody. And one thing that really helps to do that is to leave space, which gets you away from sounding like you're just playing an arpeggio shape. So here we go, like 1, 2, 3, 4. So these shapes are just small little shapes, and really the idea would be to get to where you can see, for instance, the B flat 7 chord, those 4 notes all over the guitar. That's, something to shoot for eventually. But this will get you started with it, and I hope it helps you a lot.